Superagers are looking to exercise and move all the time. Companies are starting slowly to say, well, what about flex time for you? What about your benefits being different than younger workers' benefits, like maybe caregiving? I could live into my 90s. Do I want to live with this person for another 30 years? So we're seeing a definite spike in gray divorce.
From the Zoomerplex in historic Liberty Village, the Zoomer with Libby Znaimer.
Welcome to the Zoomer. I'm Libby Znaimer. Can you actually get older without getting old? It sounds like a fantasy or a piece of marketing, but a new book says it is attainable with the right attitude and a comprehensive strategy. It's called SuperAging, Getting Older Without Getting Old. David Cravit, author and vice president of Zoomer Media, joins me for a special one-on-one on this social revolution. But before we dive in, let's tee up the topic.
We grew up with the model of default aging, which saw aging after 65 as a relatively brief period of steady decline. But what happens when people 60 and older still have 20, 30, or more years of lifespan ahead of them? This new reality is called superaging, and it's here now. In fact, the fastest growing age group in percentage terms is centenarians. What's new and different, revolutionary in fact, is how those aging years are being spent. And that comes in turn from a whole new way of looking at what aging is, and a radical new way of managing it.
David Cravit has been at the forefront of the new vision of aging that we've promoted since the beginning here at Zoomer Media. Welcome. So what is superaging?
Well, to start with, let's look at what it's not. It's a reaction against the model of aging that has dominated our life for the past half century, which I call default aging in the book. And default aging is very simple. You go to school, you get a job, you retire, bang, midnight, 65th birthday, you're a retiree. You have 10 to 15 years of life ahead of you, not much time to do anything. It's going to be a period of decline. You're going to be old. The best you can do is be defensive, kind of manage your way, hopefully without a lot of pain and suffering, hopefully to a gentle finish, not that far ahead. And that model still dominates our language, it dominates our imagery, it dominates how we think of aging. Superaging starts with, wait a minute, when I hit 65, I don't just have 10 to 15 years left to go. I might have 20 or 30 years, and we're just getting started on that. That's soon going to become 40 years. What am I going to do during that time? And it turns out that's a long enough time to not just stay alive, oh, look at how long I'm living, but to actually make changes and see it as a period of growth and development analogous to all the other phases of our life. So you become a superager by saying, I've got a lot of time left. I want to do something with that time. I want to accomplish certain things. I intend to keep on being influential. I don't want to stop working. I've got stuff to do. And it's a very positive attitude, but it flows from the fact that it's actually possible to accomplish this. So it's the exact opposite of default aging, and that default aging model is rapidly retreating, even though it persists in our language.
That's interesting. First of all, are you a superager?
I better be. I got big plans. Yes, I believe that 100 is within reach. Is
For
achievable? You? Yes, why not?
Okay.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
I'm on a plan to definitely reach 100
and
be active all the way through.
You know, it's interesting that you said it persists in our language, and it certainly persists in our institutions, because I think on the ground, for instance, you know, that magic cutoff of 65, I think most people don't think 65-year-olds are old.
And yet, all the news reports are a new cohort of baby boomers is hitting the age of retirement. We're going to be flooded by boomers retiring at 65. Oh my goodness, what are we going to do? All these boomers are going to be retiring at 65. And it turns out that they're not. And you're quite right, it's not happening that way, but it persists in our language The Canadian government, as you know, gives out CPP, Canada Pension, also has something called OAS, Old Age Supplement.
Security, yeah.
Old Age Security, pardon me. Yeah, Security, Old Age, OA. And the age at which that kicks in is not 85 or 90. It's a lot younger than that.
And the age at which your pension, Canada Pension, kicks in is 65. You can defer it until the age of 70, but not beyond that.
Not beyond that, no. And that, by the way, that whole retirement thing, why is it 65? Why isn't it some other age? Goes right back, as you know, we've talked about Bismarck and Germany in the 1870s, I guess, under threat from the socialists, wanted to do a kind of a welfare thing to make the government look good and fend off the left wing, picked up on the idea of giving pensions to everybody. It used to only be for soldiers. Picked the age of 69, they cut it to 65 a couple of years later because the average age at that time was 50-something, so he could look good but never have to actually pay out any money. But that persisted, that somehow 65 was enshrined, not just as the age of retirement, but as the age at which old age kicks in, and now you're an old person. My grandfather, who strangely, he lived to 97,
Wow.
spent 32 years describing himself as an old age pensioner. Oh, I'm just an old age pensioner. That's how he labeled himself. So he thought he was old at 65, even though he had a long run. He didn't say, well, wait a minute, I could go to 90-something. Maybe I should go back to school. Maybe I should get a life coach. Maybe I should take up a new career. All the things that are becoming more common today. He wasn't going to do that. He woke up, I think, surprised every day for 32 years.
Interesting. Okay, we have to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more of the Zoomer. We're back with David Cravit, friend, colleague, and author of the new book, SuperAging, Getting Older Without Getting Old. And you know, when we think of superaging, we think of those extraordinary people who are running marathons at the age of 100 or teaching yoga classes or whatever they're famous for doing. But you seem to suggest that anybody can become a superager.
Well, I think it's true. Obviously, there's exceptions that for unfortunate illnesses or diseases or something that can strike a person. But generally speaking, if you have decent health and you have the right tools, and in our book, the book I've done, we've identified 7, we call them the 7 A's of superaging, which are attitude, awareness, activity, accomplishment, autonomy, attachment, and the last one is avoidance of certain things. So with those 7 A's as your toolkit, I think superaging is achievable by the vast majority of people, but unlike default aging, where you kind of hope for the best, superaging does require an active mindset of, I'm going to keep track of all these things. I'm going to keep my eyes open for these various trends that are going on, these various opportunities, and new tools, new science, new discoveries, so that I'm availing myself of everything. And that's why we thought it would be, my publishers and I, that it would be good to get this codified, you know, into some sort of a guidebook, of kind of a map through this landscape, so that you can pick the right things to do to keep the superaging process going.
You talk about people having average health, but the fact is that most people, when they get to a certain age, they have conditions, often more than one.
The thrust of superaging is benefiting from it. Obviously wouldn't have occurred if longevity wasn't possible. And longevity is possible now for, there's a coming together of 2 forces, and I think they have to be understood. Number one, science, and by science I include biomedical as well as technical devices, technology. Science is enabling longevity. It's curing more diseases or transforming them into manageable chronic conditions, and it's just getting more and more all the time. So the science is there to enable you to live longer. And the second thing, it's very important to understand, who are the people doing the aging? In Canada, we have about 12 million people over the age of 55, 10 million of whom are baby boomers. So baby boomers are by far the largest group who are leading the charge, and baby boomers are a very type A generation. So, and I'm a boomer. I mean, I can say so we were accustomed to being important, to kind of being the dominant generation because of that big bulge. Marketers always paid attention to us. We were on the center stage. Whatever our agenda was mattered. And now all of a sudden we turn 55, 65. The boomer age range says 57 to 77 roughly. I don't necessarily want to get off the stage just because it says somewhere I'm supposed to. So you have a hard-driving generation, on the one hand, benefiting from an influx of all these new technologies and medical treatments and other techniques that enable this. And you get the two together, whoop, you got a new generation called superagers.
And, you know, it's interesting you're bringing up technology, because one of the stereotypes about older people is that we can't adapt to new technology.
Well, that's because the people that are making this statement forget who these generations are, and I'm going to come back to this again. Who's doing the aging? It's not the same people that were older before. In the book, I've got a picture of a sweet young thing from Woodstock, taken right at the Woodstock festival. And then she's 73 or 74, 75, Brenda. Did she age into her grandmother? No, that generation, like, just take that young imaginary woman. So the Woodstock generation immediately became yuppies. They moved from hippie to yuppie without batting an eye, grabbed every piece of technology we could get our hands on when it came along, technophilic, not technophobic. So why are we suddenly going to revert to our grandparents that are afraid of technology? Not happening. So the older generations, quote unquote, are grabbing every piece of technology they can get their hands on.
With the 7 A's, do they all have to be adopted at once?
No, what we're really saying is, here's a menu, and these are topics you have to keep your eye on. So we're saying is, don't neglect. It doesn't mean you wake up every morning and check every box. We do have some quizzes and worksheets and tips in the book, but it isn't sort of a new diet plan and suddenly that'll change everything. But it is saying that there are many more issues to accomplish this. The most popular ones, of course, are, well, what do I have to eat? What's my diet? What's my workout plan? But there's also things about attitude that are very important. There's things about planning. What are you going to do with these 20 or 30 years? How are you going to pay for it if you live that long? So there's a whole bunch of new issues that have never had to be confronted before. So it's a broad toolkit, and it's really a way of organizing your thought process so you can confront, because another problem is that the information, and we're in that business, it's a deluge. It's websites, it's blogs, it's videos, it's training, it's this magic diet, it's this magic
and so much of it unreliable.
And so much of it unreliable, and even the reliable is changing very quickly. There isn't a day goes by that I don't see a new research study that either contradicts or enhances, or we went down that trail. It's the sum total of it all that's driving this. This one trail didn't pan out. This one research project that looked promising wasn't. But when you look at the tens of billions of dollars that are being spent on this now, it's the largest growth industry on the planet Earth. And there's serious, heavy money being poured into it. So I say that superaging is not just here to stay, it's an inevitability. And it's novel because the boomers are pioneering it. But, you know, the oldest millennial is less than a decade away from turning 50, and they're going to live to 120 or more. So what are they going to be? They're going to take superaging and say, well, yeah, that's just how life. You mean there was a time where people got old at 65? They're going to look at that the way we look at ancient Rome. The average lifespan was 25 or something. We can't even imagine what that would have been like. But they're going to look at it the same way.
Okay, it's time for a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to theZoomer. Joining me is David Cravit, author of a new book, SuperAging, Getting Older Without Getting Old. And before the break, we spoke about how anyone can become a superager. So let's get to the details. The first thing you cite is attitude, and I have to confess, I get very leery when people cite attitude as the reason for longevity or survival.
Well, I think that the skepticism comes when we put more on attitude than it can do, and we have to rely on the intelligence of the reader here or the audience here. Obviously, if there is an acute medical condition that is life-threatening, a cheerful attitude isn't a magic elixir for that. So when we talk about attitude, we're talking about the ability to extend years to your life and cope with chronic conditions or the natural wear and tear on the human body. It can't be, this isn't a medical book. We're very leery of giving medical advice. And if they're, God forbid, an acute condition, a cancer or whatever that's very serious, you need a lot more than attitude. But if you're starting out with just, there's some shocking, to me it was shocking, or at least eye-opening, that a Boston University study said 15% longer, optimistic people live 15% longer than pessimistic people. There's reasons why.
There's been a lot of study. I mean, for 100 years, researchers have been looking at the mind-body connection.
Correct.
And it's pretty clear that, and you don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg. Are you optimistic because you're healthier, or are you healthier because you're optimistic? But in terms of attitude, I know that people sort of think, I mean, when I had cancer, people would say things to me like, you're doing very well, obviously, because you have a good attitude. And that's nonsense. And it also, there's pressure on people to kind of adopt a good attitude. If you want these good things to happen to you, you better be positive.
Well, it's part two of what you said. That's the fallacy, and I'm agreeing with you. That attitude can save the day. But without all kinds of other treatment, it can't save the day. But if you're talking in general terms, okay, they have done research now to try to identify, well, what's the mechanism? Because you're quite right. Dale Carnegie wrote The Power of Positive Thinking in the 1930s or late 1920s. So no one ever thought that having a bad attitude was a good thing. No one ever thought that being a pessimist was beneficial. Be cheerful, be optimistic is great, but why? What does it do? And there's two pieces of research I'd like to cite, okay? One was a very interesting study by Harvard where they took two groups of 70 to 80-year-old people, and they took them away and they subjected both groups to a battery of cognitive tests and physical fitness tests beforehand. And they took the first group away to a retreat, and on this retreat, it was all designed to look like they were living in 1959. They had the right magazines, the furniture. It was like a throwback to 1959, and they were to spend 3 days at this retreat. And during those 3 days, they were told to imagine that it really was 1959. So they would talk about Eisenhower as if he was the current president. They would talk about the news headlines. When they turned on the TV, on came black and white programming of that era. So they were to pretend, I mean, obviously they're sitting there, a 7-year-old, that it really is 1959, and they immersed themselves in that for 3 days. Gone. Next group comes in, they go into the same room, the same environment, and they're told to reminisce about it being 1959. So the newspapers are today's papers, the magazine on the coffee table is today, but the furniture said, we remember 1959, what was it? And they're asked to reminisce about 1959 and not pretend that they really are living in 1959. Then they repeat the cognitive tests and the physical fitness tests, and the group that immersed themselves in pretending they really were only 40 or 38 or whatever it was, scored way higher on all the tests than the other group. The conversion of their mental attitude to, gee, I'm only 41 and Eisenhower's the president or whatever, actually transferred over into better performance. And the theory is, it's not established yet, is that it triggers a hormonal response that reduces stress and inflammation, and pessimism increases stress and in turn produces more cortisol and produces more inflammation. They've actually traced it down, they think, to a biological mechanism. So it's more than just a generic be cheerful and yippee-yi, you know, it's starting to matter. And if you have no acute, God willing, no acute diseases or problems, it definitely can contribute. There's no question it contributes to longevity.
So thinking that you're younger is being optimistic?
Well, in that test I gave you, they were optimistic because they pretended they were younger. So they had the attitude of a 40-year-old instead of an 80-year-old. Not that they consciously said, I feel optimistic. They said, I'm only 40. So as opposed to I'm really 80. So they kind of tricked their mind a little bit. But there have been test after test after test that shows that people with a positive attitude have less stress and actually less inflammation. And inflammation, as you know, is very pervasively damaging to a whole host of chronic conditions that wind up shortening your lifespan.
There's also a lot of research that shows that people get happier as they get older.
For sure they do. It's considered one of the happier times of life if you allow it. Now, you asked a very important question earlier, chicken and egg. Are you happier because you're healthier, or are you healthier because you're happier? In the book we bring in, I found a number of tests where you can assess your own, you know, are you predisposed to be a glasses half empty person? Or are you predisposed to be a glasses half full person? And there are exercises you can do to make yourself feel better. But one of them is, SuperAging kind of feeds on itself, is that by recognizing that, hey, it actually is more possible for me to achieve this longer lifespan. It isn't just a mad dream. It isn't just some fantasy that, all right, I'll pretend to be happy and maybe it'll be good and I'll live longer. It's actually there within reach. And if it requires you to purge yourself of negative thoughts, there are techniques where you can override the negativity, and we've got them in the book.
Okay, hold that thought. We'll be right back with more of the Zoomer. We're back with David Cravit, Vice President of Zoomer Media and author of the new book, SuperAging, Getting Older Without Getting Old. And let's talk about your take on physical activity. Everyone agrees that this is the key to healthy aging. So how is the SuperAgers regimen different from the default agers?
Well, to the extent that there's any one exercise, it's not. And we're not claiming, I'm certainly not claiming that nobody ever exercised until the SuperAgers came along and started lifting weights or whatever. The problem I faced in dealing with this was that I'm trying to be a curator of information. I'm trying to survey the landscape and say, what's new, what's novel? If you're already going to a trainer, if you're already going to the gym, I don't have some magic new do 9 reps instead of 8 reps, and it's similar exercises. So what I was looking for is there a holistic thing? Is there a strategy behind this that is broader than just the exercises? And there is. And within the world of the exercises, are there a few novel things that are new that are coming along? So let me touch on both. So first of all, we found quickly, and I really like the Blue Zone program, which is everybody's familiar with, which includes not just exercise and moving, but such things as better integration of exercise and diet. Eat only 80% of your food, of your meal, downshift, move about naturally. So there was a kind of a blend of physical activity with exercise. In the world of exercising, we found a few interesting things. One was a new idea called exercise snacks, where multiple times during the day you just get up and for 1 minute you do something. So instead of saying I only go out and work out 3 times a week, and I go to the gym and I do it and that's it, and keep it up. I'm not here to tell you to stop, but SuperAgers are looking to exercise and move all the time. Interviewed a physical therapist in Florida for the book who was very helpful to me, and he said that one of the problems of even older, quote unquote, older people working out, he said women overemphasize cardio and flexibility at the expense of strength training, and men emphasize bulking up at the expense of mobility and flexibility. So that became a new idea, and it's elaborated on in the book. He was also a big believer in learning how to breathe through your diaphragm. And he also recommended before you do any exercise, go to a physiotherapist for an audit of how you move. Are you even moving properly before you start lifting or walking or whatever? But there's another thing that he insisted on that everybody's got to do, which is find a series of exercises that will improve your core for fall prevention. You do one thing as a quote-unquote older person, ager, default age or super age, I don't care what, if you can improve your core so that you are
it in right now,
stable and you're not going to fall, so these are the kinds of insights we're trying to sprinkle in here. It's not a 10 pages of diagrams of the one magic new workout. It's a little bit of everything. Another point in the fitness is that it doesn't matter how old you are. A lot of people give up. I'm too old. When am I going to start now? I've never worked out before in my life. Well, not true. And there's some startling examples in the book of people who start at 70 or more.
Or 80, the 80-year-old marathon runner.
The 80-year-old marathon runner. Well, the woman, she's actually on page 1, Lightning somebody or other, a woman. She just set the world record for the 100-yard dash for 104-year-olds. And she started taking up sprinting at the age of 84.
And if you want to be a star, you know, when you get to 104, there isn't that much competition.
But still she's doing it. You know, and good luck taking that up as a hobby at 80.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, that's what I'm admiring. I mean, the outcome is the outcome.
How key is the physical activity piece?
It's extremely important, but it's not important that it be one thing. And the other advice I got from my friend, the physical therapist in Florida, who's in the book, Dr. Will Simmons, was mix it up, walk, bike, swim, just keep moving. It's not like, oh my God, you're not doing 10 squats a day, your whole program's no good. It's not that kind of rigidity. It's more doing it, the old slogan way back when, participation. I mean, it's just doing it is so important, and doing it every day. And that's why those exercise snacks are important. If you can get up from your desk or from your couch and just walk up and down, climb some stairs and down again, do some squats. It's the little snacks. Instead of digging into the pretzels for your snack, dig into some.
Well, yeah, and we've all seen research lately that sitting is bad for you, even if you exercise at other times.
It is bad, but you have to get up and move around periodically.
Okay, there's more after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back. David, I want to get your thoughts on accomplishment and avoidance. To me, those things go hand in hand. So how do we avoid ageism when it's so pervasive in our society? And how do we achieve new accomplishments where we have to overcome ageism?
Well, let's start with the accomplishment, first of all. The biggest challenge people have in looking at that topic is it's framed usually as, okay, wait a minute, I didn't expect to still have this problem to decide what I was going to do after age 65. How do I decide? And in the book, I present some ideas, but I also interview 2 reinvention/retirement coaches. And I'm predicting that coaching in this time of life is going to become more and more. You have a financial planner, you're going to have a coach for this. And I interviewed Lisa DeRocha here in Toronto and John Windsor in Colorado, who are doing this for a living, and they had some good advice. And it came down to not being afraid to experiment and not being afraid to try things. And paradoxically, I will say this one point on the accomplishment, and then I'll move on to the ageism. The very thing that makes their clients successful, because they typically deal with a lot of executives who are retiring. Oh my God, what am I going to do? The very thing that makes you successful, which is a strong left brain, good problem-solving skills, rational, good judge of a situation, can block you from the next stage because you want to work it all out, figure it all out in your mind first before you try it. So there are some exercises in the book about how to kind of freelance a little while and just experiment with stuff. And so you would tend to go away from where ageism is. and you can find a lot more scope maybe than you thought. Part two, how do I do all this with ageism? Well, there's three aspects of ageism, and one of them was an eye-opener for me. The first one is in the workplace. Luckily, I think that may be a little bit on the wane, and for not necessarily the best of reasons, because the workplace desperately needs older workers now. Companies are starting slowly to say, well, what about flex time for you? What about your benefits being different than younger workers' benefits, like maybe caregiving? So the workplace is slowly changing. The political landscape is what worries me a lot, because that whole okay boomer and that whole you're all greedy, it's the greedy generation, it's you guys want that you took care of yourself and now the poor millennials got, that's a topic you could do, and we have done shows on that. And there are some tips in the book, but there's no substitute for just good political organization. And I put on my C.A.R.P hat here, and we got to keep fighting. But the third thing I did want to mention, ageism in the healthcare system. And it's starting to be quantified. There's actually some research, and it takes the form of the doctor either denying treatment because, well, you're too old to benefit from this, you haven't got enough time left, infantilizing language, treating the elderly like idiots.
Oh, yep.
And it actually has been shown to increase stress levels, and it produces 17 million unnecessary cases a year in the US healthcare system, costing over $30 billion. So it's a real problem.
I want to talk about the infantilization, and here's something that I come up against in my work. In one of my shows, Zoomer Week in Review, I compile headlines that are not necessarily the norm. And I always, in a draft, there's like an 89-year-old got a degree or whatever it is. And sometimes, well, great, it's an accomplishment if you have 100-year-old Captain Tom Moore walking laps and raising millions of dollars for a National Health Service. But some of it isn't it infantilizing to turn something like getting a degree when you're older into like an unusual accomplishment?
It is, and it is because it is unusual. It's getting less unusual. And it's a kind of a reverse discrimination. I call it the there, dear syndrome.
Yes.
And there are some tips in the book for dealing with it, but one of the interesting things, these are just trends that I've identified that I've put into the book, is, particularly in healthcare again, is consumerization. And I've got advice in the book for how to fire your doctor and how to fire your financial planner in case they are guilty of this, because sometimes you may find yourself in the hands of an advisor who is ageist and isn't aware even of SuperAging, isn't up to date on all the possibilities of what's going on, looks at you through a lens that says you've outlived the norm. So his brain or her brain is back in default aging. What are you still doing here? You're 85, oh, isn't that cute? Instead of, let's work together to plan another 20 years for you because you've got plenty of time to kick butt and take names. So if they're obsolete in their thinking, and there's a whole exercise in the book about how do you know if your advisor is obsolete and should literally be fired, and people are actually doing that. And on the plus side, not to knock industry, some industries, notably financial planners, have started within their industry to issue special certificates of training in dealing with older consumers and training their advisors. J.P. Morgan Asset Management told its consultants to assume that all their clients are going to live to 100. So they're retraining their advisors now. So when you sit in the kitchen with Bob and Betty, assume they're going to live to 100. Now what are you going to do? Genius. So you better have more tools up your sleeve. So the industry is trying to respond, and I think that this book, SuperAging, by kind of alerting you that these are things that maybe the reader wasn't aware of, oh, this is what's going on out there. Gee, maybe I should adjust my expectations too. Maybe these are 10 questions I should ask my doctor. I'm talking usually about family physicians here, not specialists.
It's a big problem. If you decide to fire your doctor here, try finding another one.
Try finding another one, exactly.
I have to say, my doctor is well into his 80s. Yeah. That's just fine.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
We're going to have a quick break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to theZoomer. I'm talking to David Cravit about his new book. And David, if there's one thing the pandemic has shown, it's how damaging social isolation is and how important attachment is. What do you have to say about that?
It's true, and in some ways it's very similar to the problem we saw with attitude, optimism, pessimism, in that the relationship has always been there, and they are now only beginning to understand the biology behind it. So, for example, social isolation has been associated with a 50% increase in the risk of dementia, a 30% increase in the risk of stroke. Why? Well, you could say generically it's better to have friends than not, but why? Is there a biological reason? And they have done research at UCLA, and they found that leukocytes, the white blood cells that fight off infection, of lonely people showed an increased presence of the genes that are involved with inflammation again. Loneliness and isolation equals stress. Stress equals inflammation. Loneliness also increases the odds of unhealthy behavior because you don't have people around you reminding you to take your meds or to get up out of that chair. So there's a direct biological connection now. It isn't just a kind of generic observation. It's a very important one. And superagers, being aware of this, are doing a number of things differently than default agers. First of all, I think they are more aware of it, so there's more reaching out, there's more paying attention to what does my network look like. We found a connection, and this crosses over into the activity chapter, of extra longevity if you're playing team sports. So if you're going to stay active and you can also be on a team, that actually improves your longevity even further because you get the double win of activity and connectivity. The internet, reaching out over the internet is
that the same?
No, there's research being done on which situations are better face-to-face versus online. Obviously, online is better than nothing, but they're starting to do some very interesting research in digital gaming, that seniors are flocking to gaming communities where they play, these digital games online against other people. So again, they get the cognitive skills, the eye-hand coordination, the connectivity all rolled into one.
Obviously, it's better to have a social network and friends. I don't think people drop those, deliberately. And they probably find it's one thing to say superagers make more of an effort or whatever, but people who lose their networks, I'm sure they're very unhappy about that. People die, people move, all of those things.
That's true, but another feature that is sort of counterintuitive is dropping relationships that aren't working. We're seeing a big spike now in so-called gray divorce.
Yeah.
People in their 50s and 60s who have been married for decades suddenly deciding no. And that's a direct relationship with longevity. Because in the default aging mode, if I'm 65 years old and I'm unhappy in my marriage, but I perceive that I only have 10 years to go anyway, when am I going to start now? But if I think I've got 30 years to go, even if I don't, but if I think I do, if my mindset is I could live into my 90s, do I want to live with this person for another 30 years? So we're seeing a definite spike in gray divorce, very high levels, because, and particularly interesting in this context is that most of them are initiated by the female, by the woman. And in the default aging mode, the woman was defined, heavily dependent, maybe even defined by husband. Oh my gosh, will he leave me? Will he fall in love with the attractive young secretary? What am I going to do? Now the women are saying, the kids are growing up. I never liked you that much anyway. I'm financially independent or perceive I can be. I'm out of here. And that's, so the superagers are more ready, relatively more ready, to fashion that network to their liking, mixing the people they already have and the people that they want to go out and meet, and putting themselves in situations to meet new people, and also jettisoning the relationships that weren't working for them.
Now, overall, what would you say to people who say this program is just too hard?
Well, it's not really a formal program where, wait a minute, it's Thursday and you missed your autonomy box. I mean, it's not that formalized. It's more a smorgasbord of here's the items on the buffet. Here's what you need to know about each of them. Here's some tips and techniques that could help you. But it is a lot to keep track of. And it is proactive. I mean, if there's one thing that separates default from super, it's the proactivity. But you have to start off by saying, I'm excited by having 20 or 30 more years, maybe even more. I got stuff I want to do. It's exciting to think that I don't need to sit back and let it happen to me. I can continue to do stuff, to make a contribution, to fashion my life the way I want it to be, to learn, to explore. This can actually be the best years, and not as a cliche, because look at how much knowledge and experience I'm bringing into the party. Look at all the resources I have. Look at all the money I have or could have. I can really make this thing sing. And why do I need to sit back and be passive and let things happen to me? So I think it's worth it. SuperAgers think it's worth it. Obviously, it's not going to be for everybody, but I think it's going to be for a lot of people. I'm hoping.
David Cravit, thanks so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Libby. I really appreciate it.
Well, the last century saw a huge increase in the number of years we live. Making sure those are good, even great years, is the next frontier. Is superaging a possibility that most of us can embrace? Well, that's up to us. Thank you for watching. We'll see you soon. It's time to zoom out.